So would you believe this is the sixth week in a series that we're doing on a subject called Gathering in the Light. And as I always say, if you want to catch up on previous weeks, the little red card in front of you shows you how to get that information. And if you'd like to be on our mailing list, the little blue card in front of you will help you do that as well. The series is really about preparing ourselves to make a contribution to our community this year. That's what we're really talking about. You know, how do we prepare ourselves? You know, I love that saying from Zechariah, which said, "You will not succeed by your own strength or by your own power, but by my Spirit." And the idea there is that, you know, it's really in helping or making a contribution, it's not up to us to make things happen or even to decide what we should be doing. What we have to do is to get out of the way and allow that Spirit to come through us. Last week we talked about the idea of being in the flow, to be part of the unfolding creation, to be part of love, really. That there is a primal urge of love in creation that's been there since the beginning of time. And that urge now is living through all creation still, and also living through each one of us. Each of us has that primal urge within us, and it will carry on after we've been there. That our place in the eternal life is through being part of that flow. The way we enter into eternal life is we enter into that flow. And, you know, as our body dies, that flow that has been part of us and carrying us on and driving all creation also carries on after we've died to that point of completion, you know, that the Bible calls the second coming, but is really all creation realizing its true potential in the expression of that love. That's what the end point of it all is the point where we arrive at a moment where all creation expresses its true potential through love. And, you know, what I think we do here in the chapel is to work out how to allow that flow to come through us. That's what we're trying to do. How do we allow that flow to come through us? And, you know, that's the work that we call spirituality. Spirituality is working out how to allow that flow to come through us. The work we do on ourselves through, be it meditation or spending quiet time in the mountains, bringing us closer to being able to make the right choices. You know, we study the scriptures or sages or the Buddha to work out how to make the right decisions to allow that flow of life to come through us. And our task here is, you know, we always say, you know, what do we do here? We try and actually work out together how to live our lives more skillfully. And the most skillful way, I think, to live life is to live it within that flow of life, to be a part of the unfolding of creation, to be a part of love. Do you know, I think all of us want to make a contribution. You know, we all want to make a difference to the world that we see around us. I think most of us, we all want to have the world be a better place. And if we're committed to that, to living in that flow of life, to being part of that unfolding creation, the question is, how can we actively have that come about? How can we have ourselves be more a part of that flow? And last week we talked about the importance of preparation, of being in our bodies rather than in our minds, of using those quiet times, meditation, study, to become more aware of that flow. But I think there's more that we can do as well. You know, I don't think it's just enough to be part of the dance and allow ourselves to be carried on. I think there is more that we can do. Because we're conscious of ourselves within the process, all of us as human beings are conscious of ourselves within this process, we can self-reflect. And I think what differentiates us from animals who are conscious is that they don't have the capacity to self-reflect necessarily. Animals don't self-reflect in that way. They can be part of the dance, but I think as human beings, more is expected of us. We have the capacity to tip the balance, to accelerate the process. We do have the capacity to make a difference. And I think the way that we do that, and it's the topic of the talk that I wanted to do today, the way that we do that is by paying attention. We have to pay attention to what comes our way and make use of the opportunities that are given us. You know, we have that old idea that we discussed before, that the way, what is my way in life? How do I create my way? What is the path that I have to find, or whatever it is? And we spend our whole life trying to find the right path to get on. But the old idea is that the path unfolds in front of us as we live our lives. It's not something new that we have to create. It is just something we have to be aware of as it unfolds in front of us. And if we're in that flow, if we've decided to make, and we have to decide to make being in that flow a priority, then I believe we're given everything we need to make a difference in our lives. But we have to pay attention. I talked a little last week about how, as I came towards the topic like this one, when I look at a topic, or when I sort of try and start to write these things, I do find that, verses or scriptures or things or books will come to me as I start writing. Or during the week, as if I'm on a particular topic, someone will say something and I'll recognize it as being useful. The series is really about, preparing. What I try to do is prepare myself to actually watch out for what comes my way and how information comes to me. In meditation, sometimes an idea will come and it'll fit right into where I was going. That's because I'm paying attention to what's coming at me in my life. I'm aware that anything I could come into contact with could be a way of gathering in the light, of kindling that can help build a fire to warm those around me. So I'm always looking out for it. In fact, the idea of paying attention, being the topic today, came as I sat down to do my meditation on Monday morning, an hour before I started to write this. It suddenly came to me that, that was the topic I was using, and I just went with that and used it. Everything we're given can be used in that way if we pay enough attention to notice what comes in our space. But there's so much, obviously, that stops us paying attention. We have other agendas on our minds. We're so busy that we don't notice what's right in front of us because we're thinking about something else. We're living in our minds, so we just don't notice what's there. Our phones, the media, loudness that distracts us from what's actually going on. Other people telling us what we ought to pay attention to rather than actually paying attention. I think, modern life is so full of those distractions. So what I'm suggesting today is that we really focus on paying attention to what comes into our space with the idea that we can use it to help in making a difference. This obviously presupposes the idea that we want to make a difference. And I think basically, to turn up in chapel on a Sunday, I think you do want to make a difference. So I completely, think we all agree on that. But it also presupposes that we're willing to go out of our way to make it happen, even if it's inconvenient. And for me, inconvenient is the watchword at the moment. It comes from in convenio, which is the Latin for not coming together. Convenio, venio to come, con together. That means convenient means when things come together. When things are inconvenient, it means that they are not fitting or agreeing with the way that we see our life working. It becomes inconvenient. It doesn't fit in. And whether we're prepared to do things that are inconvenient is more up for discussion in our lives. Are we willing to actually go out of our way to make a difference? Or do we just assent to it as a nice to have, so long as we don't actually have to do anything to make it happen? Do we assent to the idea and we just hope that someone else will make it happen? Because just paying attention can be inconvenient. It's interesting, the phrase paying attention. The word comes from the Latin word attentio, which means to apply the mind to. Attention, to apply the mind to. And isn't it interesting that we use the word pay? Pay, it's about to give, to bestow, to render. You pay your respects. You pay a compliment. You pay heed to advice. You pay a visit. So the act of paying attention is actually giving something. You have to give your attention. And if we give our attention with no expectation of return, if we're not looking for something in return, then the very act of paying attention is an act of love. You're giving something without any expectation of return. Paying attention is an act of love. So in paying attention, we're giving our minds to the possibility that what is coming our way might be something that could be used in making the world a better place. That our lives matter. That actually the things that happen to us matter. And if we realized it, we could actually use them. It could be a book, a phrase, a film, anything that could be used in making the world a better place. But if we're not paying attention with the idea of possibly finding something to use, we just won't notice it. We have to have it in our minds that the path we're on will throw things up that could be used in the act of what we're calling in this series gathering in the light, bringing that light to others so that their lives can be improved. And of course, one of the main things we come across in our lives is people. Marcus Aurelius again, I said, having watched the holdovers, I'm now reading through it. And again, this came in my reading last week. Marcus Aurelius says, all of us are working on the same project. Some consciously with understanding, some without knowing it. Some of us work in one way and some in others. And those who complain and try to obstruct and thwart things, they help as much as anyone. The world needs them as well. So make up your mind who you'll choose to work with. The force that directs all things will make good use of you, regardless, will put you on its payroll and set you to work. We have to, as Maureen reminded us via Mel Robbins last week, we have to just let them be angry. Just let them get on with whatever they're going to get on with. And so when we come across people in our lives, we have to have it in our minds that they could be thrown in our path for a reason. How might we help? You can see where I'm going here. Are there people that we could bring to the chapel who might benefit from hearing what we discuss together here? These ideas will only be spread if more people come. And you bringing them is a big part of that. However, I understand it might be inconvenient, embarrassing to ask them to come. But if we want more people than just a small Sunday club, we have to involve more people, and you're the ones who are meeting them. And, do think about bringing them. Which brings me to the second bit. Once you've paid attention, then you have to act. You can't just have wouldn't it be nice if, it's not enough just to have that thought. We have to get over the inconvenience and we have to act. We have to be willing to be inconvenienced as the way that unfolds in front of us may not conform to the way that we have our lives planned out in our heads. So we might be going in that direction, and it might suggest that we need to go in a different direction. And when the way that we imagine in our heads is challenged by the way that unfolds in front of us in our lives, then are we willing to be the Good Samaritan? Or do we just ignore it and pass by on the other side? The priest and the Levite they were paying attention, but decided that the path in their minds was to pass by on the other side. They noticed them, and they went to the other side, and they passed by, because it was inconvenient. But the Samaritan, though he too obviously had plans, let them go and adopted a new plan, which was to take care of the man who'd fallen among robbers. So we have to both pay attention, which in itself can be inconvenient, and then we have to act, which is even more inconvenient. So the key question really is, do we stick with the idea that we think is going on with our lives, that we want to carry on with, or are we willing, when we come across it, to be inconvenienced? And that really points out the tipping place where we have the opportunity to make a difference or not. And that tipping place is where we consider whether or not we want to be inconvenienced. Am I willing to be inconvenienced? Inconvenience is the price we have to pay to make a difference, because we're letting go of our own agendas and making room for the agendas of the one that is ordering the life that we're living in. In other words, the Spirit. We're letting go of what we think our lives are about, and we're allowing it to flow. And it's here, we talked in a couple of weeks ago about surrender and sacrifice, and they come into play here. To surrender to the inconvenience of serving others, and to have it be a sacrifice. Not a hardship. Nowadays sacrifice is seen as hardship. But really, sacrifice, going back to the Latin words, is sacrificio, a sacred act. That's what sacrifice means, a sacred act. An act giving worth to the divine, an act of worship. To worship is to give worth to. So an act of sacrifice is a sacred act for the divine. And it all begins with paying attention, giving our minds to the task of looking for ways of making use of what comes our way to help make a difference to others. And then doing what's necessary to make a difference. That's the holy life. If you want to know what the holy life is, that is the holy life. A life where what we do is an offering to the divine rather than to our own minds and our own plans. An act of giving worth to the divine, an act of giving worship. Mary Oliver, the poet, had her instructions for living. Pay attention, be astonished, tell others about it. And she said, attention is the beginning of devotion. And finally, in her famous poem, Summer's Day, she says, I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me. What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Thanks, Mike. That's lovely. So we always just have an opportunity to come back at me, anything I've said. Maybe you've got something that you've been thinking about, an experience you wanted to share. So we do have an opportunity just to do that as part of what we're doing today here. Andy first.
I loved your topic today, and it really reminded me of this film we saw on Teddy Roosevelt last week. And talk about someone who did a lot of inconvenient things in his life. He was a reformer, he fought big business, he fought government corruption, and all for the benefit of the common person who was disadvantaged. And so what he did was not easy.
Yeah.
But he continued, he had this drive that was relentless his whole life to stand up for the little guy. And so I think we could use that as inspiration and doing things that are inconvenient for us, just knowing got to have that drive to keep doing it.
Yeah, that's so right. Thank you, Andy. That's great. Anybody else? Yeah, Bruce.
I think you're being a little bit harsh when you say, go out there and serve with no expectation of return. I think we're wired to want to pay it forward and leave it better than we found it. I mean, that's how we upset the balance of nature in an evolutionary perspective. I find that when, we volunteer, we do something, whatever, for somebody else, it gives me a good feeling. And as far as the return, it's cast your bread upon the waters. It'll come back 1,000-fold, not to you directly, but indirectly the community you're in. Certainly that was much more sort of apparent when we lived in small, little tribes or even sort of agrarian villages. But today when you go to the big city, and you see some homeless person there, it's thinking, well, I could help this guy out, but I could give him some money so he could go buy some more drugs or alcohol or something. But so we think, oh, the government should take care of that. But I still think that there's sort of a, just a vicarious benefit, and it's a healthful, self-caring kind of thing.
I think it's a really good point. It does allow me to talk a little bit about, I think the key word is expectation. I think, of course, a lot of what we do does give a return. But for our own sanity, the concept of love comes without expectation. And when we don't have expectation, then, first of all, there is no disappointment because we're not expecting anything. Expectation, disappointment is an expectation that doesn't happen. That's where that comes out. But also, it just totally keeps us clean in terms of why we're doing things. And I just want to explain that. That's why I would emphasize that. It keeps us clean in the fact that that the very act of the doing, the loving act of the doing, is all. And I always think that's a nice thing to focus on. But of course, it does have rewards. There are rewards as well, and I wouldn't want to take away from those rewards. I mean, I always like to think that, I'm always a great believer in, the clergy and things like that. It's a good opportunity to actually have an employment for myself. There is obviously a reward for me being, clergy and things like that. I get paid for doing it. So there are rewards, definitely. But doing things without expectation does keep us clean. And a lot of the time, we have to look at what our motives are for doing things. That's important as well. But I think, obviously, having the rewards is also important. So I wouldn't want to take that away. But thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. Anybody else like to say anything at all? Yes.
I like to say myself, I have no expectations, but have abundant expectancy.
Yes, a pregnant
Abundant expectancy.
Abundant. I thought you said a pregnant expectancy. Abundant or pregnant? It could be the same thing. Yeah, that's right. No, abundant expectancy. No, that's lovely as well. That's lovely. I think that's nice as well. Yes, Ward.
I really liked what you said about when you're meditating or when you're reading, something just comes to you out of the ether. I find that all the time as I'm reading. Right now I'm reading a book about a speechwriter for JFK and LBJ and back in that era. And I read some of the quotes and I can put them in context of today, and they're just every bit as relevant today as they were back in the 60s. So they're words of wisdom and inspiration that are in the ether and express themselves in lyrics that Max sings, or something that you read about 1960s speechwriter.
Yeah, that's. Thank you for mentioning. I mean, occasionally people say to me, how do you come up with this stuff every week? And the truth is, the matter is that, I don't know where it comes from. And literally, I literally don't probably know what I'm going to write until the moment I arrive at my typewriter to write it. And then something just happens, and if it doesn't come through, I'll let you know. It'll be very obvious. But it happens with all of us, I think. I mean, I was, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Bob Dylan, who's obviously key for the moment. Someone asked him why he wasn't writing songs like, nowadays, like he wrote when it started. He said, well, because it came through then. And it came through. He didn't know where it came from. He didn't know how he said he didn't know how he wrote those songs. They just came through. And I think all of us have that. All of us have that ability to have it come through us. We think to write a poem, to have the. It says in the Bible, Jesus says that when you go up in front of priests and leaders, the words will be given to you as to what to say. And the words are always given to us. If we just have the confidence, having the confidence to know we're in that flow. Yes, Mark.
We just say that's a trust for spontaneous order.
A trust, go on.
Trust for spontaneous order.
A trust for spontaneous order. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And we all have that. And it's a wonderful thing to tap into. Justin writes poetry, like it is a similar sort of thing, isn't it? I should imagine. Yeah. Leslie, yeah.
I recently had a friend. I was laying in bed. It was nice and cold in my room, and I was cozy, and she's been going through. I've known her since I moved here, and she called me because she's going through a lot. She has one lung, and her breathing, and she said she felt a lot of anxiety. And I've been feeling some anxiety lately. I mean, I'm aware of it, and it's an opportunity. I know that, and I think my mind was like, well, what are you going to say? But that thing about the flow, to me it's sort of a leap of faith, because the mortal mind or whatever is right there to say, I don't know what to say, or your ego gets in and says, oh, I feel that way too. And then I just let go. And that's a leap of faith for me.
Yeah. For
that flow to come through and speak. And I've had that, it's a practice, I guess. But the more I practice, the more amazing it is. All of a sudden, I'm just a vessel. and I'm just amazed. And I'm saying to her, thank you. Listen to, I'm not over here having it all together, but something's coming through me, and I trust it, and it's for both of us to listen to. And when this first started happening to me, being available for that flow, I was taking a course. It was like a year-long course, and we'd get together as a group to talk about if anything was off or not going right in the group. And I was really afraid to speak, or my mind would go, you have nothing to say, nothing. You have nothing to contribute here. And I would notice that I would get antsy. I mean, I just start moving around. And eventually, I would say, I don't know what I'm going to say. And then I was out of my own way, and the flow, it's really a universal, it's for all of us.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful practice, so thank you for listening. Pray for my friend.
Thank you, Leslie. That's great. Really appreciate that. Yeah, Carol.
I believe that in everyone there is a Samaritan, there is a good Samaritan. How you deal with that and how you respond, like Bob's an engineer. He sees something, he's going, something's wrong here. I've got to decide what the problem is, and once you determine what the problem is, you can fix it. Then I'm a nurse. I see someone hurting, and God just gave me the gift of being able to relate to people and to know how to help them. And I think everybody responds differently as a Samaritan, and I don't think they do it for self-worth. They just do it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Lovely. Thank you, Carol.
You don't really use a typewriter, do you?
Did I say typewriter? No, I don't. No. I just said keyboard, of course. But one of my daughters is buying a typewriter at the moment, which is why it's in my mind. Anybody else before we finish?